So here's how you have a romantic relationship with your favorite art and artists. These 3 books will serve as a primer for the parasocial relationships that you've developed, and they've helped me understand how my previous work in Ichi Kimchi became a devout cult following and how this channel hasn't. So I've been reading the works of Rita Felski, starting with Character, 3 Inquiries in Literary Studies, which is this really beautiful way to think about bringing empathy into your reading. And then last week, I read The Limits of Critique, which is a banger of a book addressing the limits of academic reading, as well as a solid guess as to why the humanities are struggling. And then this week, I read the most relevant to this talk, Hooked, Art and Attachment. Now, all 3 books examine the relationship between art and the audience, between books and readers. And for all of us that have spent too much time getting into attachment and relationship psychology, I think that you're going to find these books a great way to understand the relationship you build with art and artists, with creations and creators. I'm going to start by saying that these aren't easy books to get into. I read Attached by Amir Levine a few years ago, and it's just so straightforward that anybody can pick it up. Understanding attachment theory is really amazing stuff, but be warned, as you can get one-shotted by it and then become addicted to watching Instagram slop demonizing your avoidant partners. Be careful, it happens. Felski's work, though, is really deeply academic and is very technically written. She's not approaching connection with artists through folk psychology and Instagram hooks as much as she's approaching it through the history of theory and criticism. She has enough endnotes and citations in these books to make its own short book. She has read a lot of theory of reading. And one of the major problems she's trying to answer is, what's the difference between how you read a book and how somebody with a PhD reads a book? Now, we've been told that there's a difference. An amateur reading often gushes over what they like. Oh my God, this is the best book ever, or this book will totally change your life. Or you have book talk content that offers lists and summaries of books. Like, here are 5 books you should read if you like Jane Austen, or here are 9 books you should read after a divorce. It's really low-level content. While on the other hand, we've also been told that a professional reading from a professional reader is deep. It's close reading. The professional is dispassionate. They are distant. They use this language of being distant while reading closely somehow. They are these objective scientists of reading. Now, this kind of language employs what is called the hermeneutics of suspicion, which is basically the professional being like Sherlock Holmes when they read, uncovering clues from the texts and finding some hidden meaning that has deceived the amateur reader, but not the clever professional. Oh no, this professor sees things that the amateur does not see. Through years of sharpening their analytical toolkit, they use words like deconstruction and post-colonialism and post-structuralism and postmodernism and post-postmodernism, which is honestly my favorite kind of modernism, by the way, this post-post kind, because regular postmodernism is just so passé. And then they evoke the holy spirits of Marx and Foucault. They employ feminist and queer theory, and in the end, they discover some form of systemic oppression that the book is supporting. And they, the brilliant readers that they are, were able to protect themselves from the ideology of the book, and in turn, they will now protect you from these harms. The more buzzwords you could throw in there about patriarchy or oppression or misogyny or marginalization or erasure or systemic something or other, the better your reading and the more your credibility and credentials. Now, a useful idea to explore here is the rejection of normativity. In academic readings, what's normal is considered to be oppressive and hegemonic and a perpetuation of ideologies. While Thread's content keeps on saying stuff like normalize blank and blank, academia fights against norms. So you could see this a lot in the boundary blurring of queer theory as well. Outside of academia, you could see this in the emo and punk culture of my day and whatever anti-normative trends have been normalized today, like, for example, the neurodivergent versus neurotypical movement, which have normativity baked into their titles. And so Felski, in a way, has noticed that fighting the norms has become the norm. In a way, she applies critical thinking to the patterns of critical thinking. A question that I like to ask sometimes is, when fight the power becomes the power, then who watches the watchman? And in a lot of academic reading and in social media as well, there's a standardized approach of dismissing others, of rejecting norms, and to perpetuate cancel culture. You might notice that this talk is very meta in a way. It's an observation of the pattern of patterns, and it's so dear to my heart as I absolutely love metamodernism. Now, bringing this back to attachment theory, I'm sure that you can notice that this really kind of rhymes a bit with avoidant attachment now, doesn't it? The amateur reads with anxious attachment and gushing identification with the text, while the professional reads with avoidant attachments and worries about their freedoms being impinged. All right, don't you cross my boundaries, which are constantly changing, and you'll know when you cross them when I tell you that you cross them. And so then, how do we read instead with secure attachment? The starting point is to acknowledge that you will always bring some of yourself into whatever you read. There is no professional or unbiased or objective review of anything, no matter how many credentials you have. You will never see a text as it is. You only see it as you are. You are bringing your world of context into every reading that you do. And so be more aware of yourself as you read. Part of secure attachment is to understand what you're contributing to this relationship, both to the success of it and to its failures as well. Now, I recently offered 4 different interpretations of The Stranger by Albert Camus, and I read it as a Christian, as a Buddhist, as neurodivergent, and as pan-national. And of course, I am fluent in all of those worlds. By no means are any of those readings the right reading or what the author intended, but they're interesting ways of seeing myself and my values represented in the text. They are ways of me opening up and naming what's alive in me, what I find salient, and finding common ground with someone. Now, this way of expressing myself and my interpretations, though, is very unacademic and has been discouraged since early elementary school for me, where I've been told to never use I in an essay. Don't talk about yourself ever. Only talk about the facts, as if we have access to the facts. But that's another conversation. And Felski raises a point of concern in academia. Won't professors then be flooded with really boring papers about the feels and the traumas of their students? Gross, right? Students should be taught to alienate themselves from their writings. Professors don't want to hear about your lives at all, which to me sounds like a shitty way to be a teacher, to be honest. Professors should connect with their students more and understand their worlds and resonate with them rather than preaching from a pulpit and hiding behind their credentials. But these professors aren't as objective as they claim, and I'm going to offer a story here. So I did my undergraduate degree with a specialist in English literature, and I graduated with distinction. Yes, there is my credential tapping. I was a great student and I had a high GPA. I raised my hand all the damn time in class, and I made myself known to every one of my professors. And I got A's and A minuses on just about all of my papers. In one of my classes in 3rd year, I had a crush on a student who wasn't really doing all too well in class. She just sat in class, said nothing, and was smoking hot. But she only got C's on her papers. And so I offered to help her write her paper because I did not have any other flirtation tools available to me at the time. And so I went over to her house one afternoon and really I just about wrote the whole damn paper for her. And well, nothing happened between us. I just wrote the paper for her and I awkwardly left. Smooth. Mm-hmm. Now, what's interesting is not that I was a nerd and still am a nerd. That's something else. What's interesting is that the paper that I wrote for her had a much more interesting argument than my own. And yet, that paper still got a C, while mine still got an A. The professor did not have an objective assessment of either of the arguments. His connection to me and to my hand waving in class really impacted his grading of my paper, and his complete lack of connection with her influenced his grading of hers. There was nothing professional about his assessment. He graded based on his feels. And so shouldn't we kind of be more honest about the relationship that professors have with their students, with the way that students have a relationship with the books and with the papers, and with the professors having a relationship with the papers as well? Let's be more honest about all of this. This all contributes to what Felski describes as atmosphere. It's never just you and the text itself. It's not like in a theater in which here's a screen being presented and here's you on the other side. The boundary is not that set, it's very blurred. When you read a book, you're also influenced by the cover of the book, by the publishing house that marketed it, by the social media that talked about it. It's your previous experience with similar authors and themes. It's the soundtrack that you're hearing now when you read the book that you heard when you read another book. It's your childhood memories. It's all of this that's being fed into whatever that you read. A text isn't just ideas in itself. It's this diffuse atmospheric cloud of many other experiences that contribute to your connection with the book, which, time to get real here, is why this channel right now is nowhere near as successful as my previous channel, Eat Your Kimchi. What I had back then was atmosphere. It was a regular schedule. There were repeatable screens and opening lines that people knew. What I don't now have is, it's time for Best Observation of Book Series, the Meta Edition. And I don't have the same music or graphics or even visuals as before. This content I'm making now is visually starved. It's language heavy with static monologues, and it's not maximalist editing and visually pulling and dynamic dialogues. I used to think that the lack of this channel's success was that my previous viewers just aren't smart enough to understand what I'm saying. And that was a very ungenerous reading. Really, there's just no atmosphere here for them to connect or to associate with. And so now that this kind of vulnerability dump is over, let's bring this back to Felski's work. What I got from this in the end is an awareness of my own pseudo-academic tendency to label all the things that are wrong. And I got a fresh look at how I think about myself, both as a reader and as a creator. Now, this is just what's salient to me in reading these books. I really absolutely loved them. I got into her first book because I'm obsessed with the topic of empathy, and so I was thrilled to see a book that was urging us to bring empathy back into our readings. For the second book, The Limits of Critique, some of you who are sick of news and the left-leaning side of academia will definitely find a solid catalog of burns and takedowns to all of this academic nonsense. But otherwise, for those of you who, like me, are leaning more towards meta-modern sensibilities and are drifting away from the endless game of tag you're it, kind of finger-pointing and blaming, and you want to develop a healthier relationship with yourself and with the world around you, then I think that Felski offers a really solid reading list here. She's doing absolutely great work, and I'm so happy that I found out about her. And I just wanted to share this joy with you. And now, if you're interested in reading more about reading and in improving your own literacy, my app, Reading Rate, has a section dedicated to critical theory. Any book that you read improves your domain mastery in whatever the book is about. And once the app notices a few books that you've read in a similar theme, then it's going to begin to start suggesting some theory that you might find interesting to deepen your understanding of the subject. And that way, you're not just bouncing from one book to another, but you're actually developing a deeper connection with the ideas that matter to you most. So give it a shot. I hope you like it. And now I'm reading Clarice Lispector. I'm 40 pages into this book, and I really hope that it gets better. I'll tell you about it as soon as I'm done, because my God, this is such a slog right now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.